Just to correct the record just slightly, the title of this story, is It's Not My Dog, which was very important to me. That distinction will become clear. This is in my first book of stories, Dangerous Animals Club.
Which is available for purchase after the show. Okay.
Oh. I think it's safe to say that animals did not fare too well in our neighborhood during my childhood. The 1950s, Texas, oh yeah, animals had a lot to deal with. There were no leash laws, so dogs were constantly run over. Everyone owned a gun, so dogs and cats were frequently shot. Some of my neighbors owned multiple animals, so there was animal-on-animal violence. And some of the local animals were victims of all three scenarios, like Charlie Harp's dog, Kooky. Kooky lived across the alley. He was a Chihuahua mix that over the course of the year was shot, run over by a pickup truck, and kicked by a horse, leaving him with 3 legs and 1 eye. In the best of times, Kooky was an irritating dog. Always yapping whenever you got in and out of your car, but his string of injuries and his ridiculously slow demise by subtraction demoralized everyone in our family, especially my mother. She would stare out of the patio window and watch him hobble about, yapping, attempting to chase cars up and down the alley. She would shake her head and look at me, and I would never be able to tell if she was about to laugh or cry. She would just look and utter one word: terrible. There was a particularly painful period when Charlie's family got a rooster for some reason, and the rooster would chase Kooky around the backyard and peck at his rear end. But as bad as that scene was, there was a worse scene down the block. A couple of houses down from us lived the Dodges. Mr. Dodge was a full-blooded American Indian who performed in movies. And if you are a fan of the American Western, you know Mr. Dodge, because he was the Indian that could ride full speed on a horse while shooting a bow and arrow. That was Mr. Dodge and his daughters. Debbie and Donna were also talented. They sang and danced and did a hobo act. There was talk they were going to be on the Ed Sullivan Show. However, their coexistence with the animal kingdom was misguided. They acquired a dog, a duck, and a horse, kept together in a small backyard. These 3 animals created an ecological nightmare. The horse ate every blade of grass, every leaf on their tree, turning the yard into a moonscape. The duck sat on the horse's back to avoid the dog. The dog barked at the duck constantly. It became a real-world textbook of catastrophe theory, which states that order can only be maintained for a certain period of stress and then all bets are off. That rubber band snapped one rainy day after school. The horse was shot by a passing motorist, enabling the dog to eat the duck. White feathers covered their yard. It was like a deleted scene from Saw 3. The police investigated, but to no avail. It was a drive-by. And on top of all of this brutality, Billy Hart and I formed the Dangerous Animals Club. We made regular forays into the woods with jelly jars, broomsticks, and chemicals to bring the animal kingdom to its knees. In the end, the animal kingdom won, but you could still make the case that it was a dangerous time to be an animal in our part of the world. But despite this climate of abuse, I developed a strong attachment to animals, perhaps too strong. When I was 5, I went to a preschool called Storybook Playhouse. One morning, our teacher called my mother up, said she had to come to school and talk to me for disciplinary reasons. I was not participating in the tap dance part of the class because I claimed I had turned into a rabbit, and rabbits don't dance. The teacher told me I had to join the others. I recall sitting on the bench in a cat-like pose, resting my knees on my elbows, squinching my nose. She told me once again I could join the others or be punished. I told her I could not understand her because she spoke English and rabbits can't talk. My mother arrived. I was hopping around. I had further transformed by pulling a long grocery receipt I took from the car and I kept in my pocket. I began eating it. The teacher confronted Mom and started talking in low, urgent tones. Occasionally, the teacher would point in my direction, and Mom would look at me with a concerned expression on her face as she saw me hopping around. I only heard the mumbled words, rabbit, not listening, and sassing me. I knew, even at the age of 5, the only offense that had any attraction was sassing. Sassing is such a gray area. It's only defined by the grown-up who heard it. Sassing could or could not be a hanging offense, depending upon my dad's mood after work. Mom nodded to the teacher and walked over and sat down with me. She asked why I wasn't listening. I told her I was a rabbit and I couldn't dance. Mom said whether or not I danced, I shouldn't eat the grocery receipts from the A&P. The ink was bad for me. I told her the ink was the best part. My mother shook her head and told me, rabbits don't eat paper, Steppy Doors. Goats do. If you kept it up, you could turn into a goat. I looked at my mother with fear. I had begun yet another unexpected transformation. I liked being a rabbit. I began to dream about rabbits. I imagined I was walking in the woods and came upon 2 lost bunnies. I told them I had a home hidden in a trunk of a tree, and I took them there, and I opened a secret door. I brought the rabbits inside. I gave them a bowl of water and a plate of fried chicken. The rabbits thanked me for my kindness and then started gnawing on the drumsticks. I have never been able to adequately explain the rabbit period of my life. I've often heard that imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. I'm not sure I ever bought that. I believe imitation may be the sincerest form of regret. A lot of the ways we live and react come from seeds planted in our childhood. Now, this idea is not new. It's an idea that's in just about every country western song. Country music is the final repository of a good idea before civilization drops it. That's why a good country song could always make you cry. It reminds you of something you never should have forgotten. The seeds that are planted in us as children are amoral. It's our free will that gives them meaning. For example, take the animals in our neighborhood. The seeds of neglect and cruelty were planted in me, but it was my choice as to whether these became ideas I would embrace or reject. These seeds, like the tides, work powerfully in our lives, often invisibly, waiting for someone or something to bring them to full force in our lives. One of those tides turned for me in 1983. My girlfriend Beth and I came back from a camping trip to Havasu Falls, which is an offshoot of the Grand Canyon. We were gone for about a week and were exhausted. We had never camped before, so I had to buy a tent, sleeping bags, air mattresses, canteens, camping utensils, backpacks, and flashlights. So basically, we paid about $1,500 a night to sleep on the ground. But we weren't eaten by bears, so I figured we broke out even. We had a friend of ours watch the house for a couple of days while we were gone. We returned late one afternoon, tired, dirty, in desperate need of a bath. We dumped off our backpacks in the living room, opened the doors and windows, happy to be home. The only thing that marred our return was what appeared to be a dead dog lying in our backyard. Besides the awfulness of seeing the body, it was a mystery as to how the dog got there because the yard is completely enclosed. Our suspicion rested on our house sitter. I called her up, got a confession. She said she was having a party at our home in our absence when a sick, starving dog came through the woods and collapsed on the driveway. She felt sorry for it, to a point. She carried it into the backyard, gave it the remains of a deli platter. The dog tried to eat some roast beef and pastrami, tried to drink a margarita. But in the end, it was too weak and keeled over. Nobody at the party wanted it. She didn't have the heart to move it. And that was over a week ago. I nudged the dog with my foot. Nothing. Beth told me I would have to call the city to cart the dog away. I had no idea who to call. I wanted a hot bath. I didn't want to have to deal with a carcass. I went inside to look up the dead dog division of the city of Los Angeles. And while I'm thumbing through the yellow pages, I look outside at the corpse in our backyard, and lo and behold, the corpse was looking back at me. We made eye contact before it dropped its head back to the ground. I called to Beth. We went out to investigate. She came running out, and we both took a closer look. We came to the conclusion that whether sick or starving, the dog was near death. Beth told me, be careful. It wasn't our dog. If we fed it, it would be. That's crazy, I said. Beth said, no, trust me. It doesn't matter how nasty a dog is. If you feed it, it will be yours. That is the rule. Dogs think with their stomachs. You never had a dog. You don't know what you're getting into. Beth was right. I didn't know anything about dogs. I never had a dog except for about 20 minutes when I was 7 years old. It was a grim childhood event. Our family had 2 pet snails. Mom thought it would be a good strategy to occupy my time with a normal pet. She got dibs on a Cocker Spaniel puppy. She brought it home. We fed it. We named it Honey. We talked to it in baby talk. We petted it. We poked its sides ever so gently, causing it to vomit on the kitchen floor. Unfortunately, my father witnessed the event and said something along the lines of, "Get that damn dog out of here." So Honey was here and gone. And that was my experience in handling a dog. Beth left me there to ponder while she went to take a bath. To feed or not to feed? I had the first flash of memory to the Dodge's backyard and that starving horse and that poor duck. I couldn't help myself. I went inside to see if we had any food in the fridge. The only thing that was there was part of a leftover turkey sandwich. I put it on a plate, went out to the backyard with a bowl of water, put it by the dog, went inside. I took a hot shower and climbed into bed. Beth was reading. Without looking up from her book, she asked, "You feed it?" I confessed, "Turkey sandwich." "It's your dog," she said. I got defensive and said, "It's not my dog. Anyway, I don't think the dog is going to live into morning. Okay, how about this? Tomorrow, if it's alive, I will take the dog to the vet, let them treat it, and send it out for adoption. They do that sort of thing all the time." Beth was unconvinced. "Okay, but that dog is not staying here. It is the dirtiest, ugliest dog I've ever seen." I know, I said. "It's horrible. It stinks. I'm going to get rid of it." I turned out the light, praying that the Grim Reaper would visit our backyard that night. Grim Reaper let me down. Next morning, it was still breathing, so it was off to the vet. I put the dog on my lap and headed down the hill. I looked at this thing of filthy, matted fur that had the stench of death about it. I thought it couldn't be any worse. Once again, I was wrong. The dog groaned and let loose with a diarrhea explosion. I erupted in a torrent of expletives directed at the dog as I did figure eights down Laurel Canyon Boulevard. When I gained control of the car, I pulled over and rolled the windows down for air. The dog looked up at me in utter humiliation. I looked back and felt guilty. I told her, "Don't worry. It's all fine. 10 more minutes and I'm going to check you into the nice vet man, and it's a Reba-Dutchie, baby." I stopped off at the 7-Eleven, got a big cup of water, tried to wash off my pants and the dog. It made it worse. We still stunk and it looked like I had the accident. We did not win any fans in the waiting area of the clinic. Between the stains and the stink, most pet owners gave us a wide berth. I was called up to the reception desk. The nurse asked me what was wrong with my dog. I explained, "It's not my dog. I found it and it needs to see a doctor." The woman looked at me without a glimmer of humor or hope. "And what is your dog's name?" I explained again. It's not my dog. So I don't know its name, may not even have a name." The nurse said, "For treatment, we need to know the name of your dog." I became more intense. I said, "It's not my dog." She said, "Well, whose dog is it?" I said, "I have no idea." She said, "Well, we can't see a dog unless it has a name and you own it." There was something Kafkaesque about the bureaucratic cloud hovering over the pet clinic. But I had something Gregor Samsa did not have. I had a MasterCard, and that worked wonders in the dog registration process. The nurse ran the card through the machine and said, "There you go, but I still need the name of your dog." I gave in and said, "Pooch." She smiled and looked at my credit card. "Pooch Tobolowsky." "Yes, ma'am. Thank you." She took the dog away from me and made a face of sheer revulsion. They would have to clean the dog before the doctor saw it, so I would be billed for a bath as well. I left the dog in their competent hands, drove home with the windows rolled down, thinking I would probably have to sell the car and burn my clothes. I jumped in the shower. Beth came in and said I had a phone call. It was from the vet. He wanted to talk to me about Pooch Tobolowsky. Beth was not pleased. I stepped out of the shower, wrapped a towel around my waist. I ran to the phone with Beth calling after me. "I told you if you fed that dog, you would own it." The doctor explained that Pooch would need to be on an IV for about 10 days. They would have to put her on vitamin therapy. She was so dirty they couldn't just wash her, they had to shave her. In the process, they discovered she was covered with small tumors that would have to be removed. The doctor told me I was looking at several $100s in bills, and even at that, he could not guarantee the dog would live. And he wanted to know what my decision was. Treat the Pooch, put her down. The ghost of Cookie the Chihuahua hobbled in front of me. I was uncertain of the dividing line between kind and cruel, but in the end I pushed aside any reasoned debate and just said, "Treat her." 10 days later, I went back to the vet. You should have driven that car. I signed the credit card bill for $600, and the nurse called back for Pooch Tobolowsky. I gasped when, after a few minutes, the assistant came out with a shaved dog covered with scars and stitches from numerous surgeries. But when the Pooch saw me, she leapt from the assistant's arms and ran helter-skelter across the floor of the waiting room and jumped into my lap. She started licking my face furiously and crying, and at that point, I knew, for better or for worse, she was my dog. The doctor came out and told me she was not strong enough to eat dog food. I would have to cook a mixture. of sauteed hamburger, egg, and rice 5 times a day. She could probably eat that. I said, well, if she didn't, I would. The vet wanted to see her again in 2 weeks. We got back to the house. Pooch was ecstatic. She was at home. She ran across the backyard, barked at the invisible squirrel. Beth heard us and came outside. She saw Pooch's buzz cut highlighted by fresh stitches and green antibiotic ointment, and she started laughing. Oh my God! Now she really is the most hideous dog on earth. I said, Beth, we could still take her back to the clinic for pet adoption day. Beth laughed harder than ever and said, are you kidding? No one in their right mind would take this dog. It's horrible. It's a Frankenstein dog. Pooch ran over to Beth, almost knocking her down. She started licking her. Beth fell on her back on the grass, laughing. Pooch jumped on her and continued with the affection offensive. If nothing else, Pooch embodied the joy of being alive. The next week, I spent most of my waking hours in the kitchen, cooking rice, simmering hamburger. This is dog food that could have won Iron Chef America. Pooch would watch me through the back door. I asked Beth if we could let Pooch inside. Beth explained no. There are 2 kinds of dogs, outdoor dogs and indoor dogs. Pooch was an outdoor dog. That proclamation lasted about 3 hours. Pooch snuck in behind me during one of my many trips to the kitchen to the dog bowl. Once inside, Pooch ran roughshod over everything, barking, jumping on furniture, knocking things over. Beth said now that the dog had come inside the house, we would have to teach it behavioral rules. And for that, a squirt bottle was the only way. I went to the gardening store. I asked the woman if she had anything I could use on a dog. She gave me a bottle that would shoot several sprays ranging from a fine mist to a long-range stream. I set the bottle for stun and came home. I filled it with water and waited for the first infraction that came after about 60 seconds. Pooch started barking at the invisible squirrel in the backyard. She started leaping against the back door in response to nothing, so I shot the dog with the spray bottle, and she stopped. She turned, looked at me. I shot her again. She loved it. She thought I had come up with a novel form of hydration. But now, she was coming up to me for an occasional drink. After 10 days, it was time to go back to the clinic to get Pooch's stitches removed and a follow-up visit to the doctor. I waited for about 20 minutes. The vet came out to see me. He had a strange look on his face. He said, Stephen, can I see you in my office? I felt uneasy. I didn't even know vets had offices. I walked back to a little room with a desk, some textbooks, family photos, and a poster on the wall of the life cycle of the tapeworm. The doctor went right to his x-ray viewer and turned it on, and there was a strange image, which I assumed was that of a dog. He took out his pen and used it as a pointer and began, Stephen, I'm sorry. I need to show you why your dog is going to die. Die? My brain went blank. I heard his words and I couldn't feel a thing. He said malnutrition had kept her spine from developing as it should have. Her discs were swelling. Sooner or later, a disc would create enough pressure to cripple her. Eventually, it would kill her. I asked, how long? The doctor looked somber and said, soon, 8 weeks, 10 weeks. All you could do is keep Pooch comfortable. Try to keep her calm. Come back in a couple of months. If she's in any pain, we can put her down. I was in shock. I shook his hand, collected the dog, and started home. She was in my lap. I rolled down the window so she could stick her head out to the breeze, and the wind blew back her ratty bangs. She stuck her tongue out so it was flapping in the wind. And I broke down and started to cry. I pulled the car over, and much to Pooch's surprise, I wailed like I had never done in my life. And that's when I was certain she was my dog. After about 3 minutes, I collected myself and continued home. I carried Pooch out of the car so she wouldn't bound over to Beth. I placed her on the ground. She ran over to the tree, started barking at the invisible squirrel. Beth asked me how she was. I sat her down in the yard and told her the sad story of our dog. And Beth began to cry and held on to me for comfort. The Pooch ran around us both joyously, unaware of the source of our grief. I have noticed in life that even the most casual relationship with an animal is capable of eliciting powerful emotions. You can know a person for years and not be moved by them, but their cat is another story. We took a breath and went inside, left the door open so Pooch could follow. We walked back to the bedroom. Pooch trotted behind. We opened the door to the dog-free zone. Beth lifted Pooch and set her on the bed. Pooch could not believe her good fortune. She spun around in circles and snuggled down between us. Beth said if she only has a few weeks with us, she should be happy. Next morning, I decided in her remaining time, Pooch should see the world. Every morning we walked. We went off in different directions, exploring the wilds of the Hollywood Hills. At night, Pooch nuzzled between Beth and me. She took over the entire bed. We slept on the periphery. But every time we felt like we were going to fall off the edge, we thought of Pooch's final days. Her comfort came first. The date neared for the final visit to the vet. That day, Pooch and I walked from the top of our mountain to the bottom. We sat by a creek and I fed her Pooch burgers. We shared a drink from a canteen, walked back up the mountain. I told Beth we were going to the doctor. She hugged me, kissed the Pooch. We headed off for the clinic. We arrived. Our doctor was there waiting for us. I handed over the Pooch. He said he would check her out. He would come and talk to me before he did anything drastic. My dear friend Bob told me that we spend the first part of our lives choosing the people we want to live with, and the last part of our lives choosing the people we want to die with. For whatever reason, Pooch chose me. She gave me the opportunity of making the dream I had as a little boy, the dream with the rabbits, come true. She was lost. We brought her into our secret home in the woods. I gave her water and a turkey sandwich. The doctor interrupted my rabbit reverie. He came out looking concerned and asked me to come back with him. We went back to his office and he pointed to Pooch's x-rays and he said, "I can't explain it. The Pooch is cured." Her spine is normal. The discs are normal. I've never seen anything like this. I said, "What, she's going to live?" That's right. Her blood work is perfect. Her muscles are no longer atrophied. Whatever you did it right. And I thought for a moment, then it hit me. Good God, we walked every day, all the time, up and down the Hollywood Hills. He said, "Well, all of that exercise did it. She's lucky she found you." I said, "So I could take her home?" He says, "Yeah, take her home. She's all yours." We rode home in the car with the windows rolled down, the wind tousling her ears and tongue. We got home. I told Beth the news. Beth was overjoyed. We hugged each other, and then we realized that we now had a dog with no discipline at all that slept in the middle of our bed. And there was nothing to be done about it but grab the squirt bottle in case she got thirsty in the middle of the night. And be grateful that she was with us and would continue to be with us for a long, long time.